Greetings and welcome to the St. Louis Country Day School Archives. My name's Cliff Saxton. I'm a 1964 Country Day graduate, and I, along with Peter Griffin, 1969 CDS grad, manage as volunteers the St. Louis Country Day School Archives. The archives exist to preserve the mementos and memories of Country Day as a standalone institution from 1917 when it was founded until 1992 when it merged with Mary Institute to form MICDS. We're located on the lower level of McDonald Hall, the STEM building. We have a 900 square foot gallery and an archive here. And we have literally thousands of artifacts going back over 100 years to the very first days of Country Day and continuing throughout its 75-year history as a standalone institution. Mary Institute, by the way, has its own excellent archives. We handle a number of roles. One of them is to assist the Alumni and Development Office and the Communications Office of the school with such events as reunion, as the Legacy Dinner, and other events that come along in the course of the year. We also respond to inquiries for assistance, people doing research on individual students, on faculty members, on the school itself. And those come in with some degree of regularity. We also have an educational component. We host school classes. We've had lower schoolers here. Each year the history department sends several classes through. And we've also hosted the Rams football team several years in the fall. Peter Griffin, my associate, who's our sports guru, gives them a pep talk on the Country Day style of football and talks about the tradition in football, which really goes back a century. It's very impressive in terms of longevity and performance. The archives has benefited through the years from a lot of people who have been careful to save things, not to pitch them, to offer them to us first. And we see the results in the artifacts that we have around us. Among the people who really played key roles, our predecessor, John Stewart, who retired not long ago from MICDS and was a longtime Latin teacher, did a super job of gathering things, and which we have been filing and sorting and digitizing to the degree that we could. Other faculty members through the years who have been key players: Bob Reeve, the music teacher, Eugene Squire Hecker, Bob Wells, and Gordon Brown. From the alumni ranks, we have had dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of contributions, but key among those are the contributions from Bill Henry, Paul Hales, Alan Whittemore, and Joe White. And we're very, very grateful for the support that is given to this volunteer function, and it's what keeps our collections growing, and it keeps it interesting for us. The archives actually dates back to the very first day of Country Day's first year, 1917, when one of the original faculty members, Robert Thompson, began keeping scrapbooks in which he pasted newspaper clippings, photographs, programs, all kinds of things that chronicled the first years of the school. Robert Thompson later became the longest serving headmaster of Country Day from 1921 until his death in 1942. One of the things that he put into his scrapbook, which was so valuable to us, was the very first issue of the Country Day News. There weren't many copies of it printed. It was printed on October 27th, 1917. And since then, the news was published weekly for almost its entire run through the 80s and into the 90s. And it's a wonderful chronicle of Country Day. And searching through its pages, the photos, the stories, the sense of the life and times of Country Day are invaluable for research and just getting a sense of how Country Day evolved over the years. When you step into the archives, you see two seals on the wall. Those are the two crests that Country Day had during its existence. The first one was commissioned in 1927 at the request of a couple of Country Day parents who thought the brand new Country Day School needed a logo. The second one came about in 1955 when the school was contemplating the move to Warson Road from Brown Road. And the new circular seal was designed by Gordon Raymond. Mr. Raymond was the manual arts teacher, and many of us remember spending periods in his shop class making lopsided stools, misshapen bowls, lucite paperweights, and letter openers, things that we proudly gave our parents at Christmas time and which subsequently sort of vanished from sight, and not too many of them survived, which is probably a good thing. Among our collections are a lot of different publications which students and the school put out over the years. The Country Day News, of course the Cadasco yearbooks, buzz books and catalogs and literary magazines, sports programs, the Mask and Troubadours dramatic organization programs, alumni publications, commencement programs, cum laude, prize speaking, and then Prom Magazine. You may remember Prom Magazine. It was sold for a dime, came out every month, and it was actually published by a Country Day alum, Julian Miller. So Country Day got a lot of ink in there. Prom Magazine covered all of the high schools in the area, and there were monthly columns by students from each high school. Our column was called the Country Day Cable. And Prom Magazine, if you can find copies, they are a lot of fun to look through and see what life was like back in the 50s and 60s. Now, most of the artifacts in the Country Day Archives collections are highly portable, such as footballs and trophies and plaques and yearbooks and copies of the Country Day News. I'm seated on the largest artifact in our collections, and this is an original pew from Danforth Chapel, complete with chapel hymnal, which a lot of alums will remember. Danforth Chapel was built in the mid-1950s as part of the new school campus on Warson Road, and it served until 2012 when it was raised to make room for McDonald Hall and Brower Hall. I have to tell you, the pews are no more comfortable today than 50 years ago when we had to sit through sometimes lengthy programs. But on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of really good memories, student memories and alum memories about Danforth. When we and friends and dates and parents would sit here and enjoy troubadours and mask presentations, cum laude ceremonies, commencements, rally days. The pews themselves we rescued just before the demolition. We got several of them. They're located across the campus. A number of them are in the middle school. So while we, some of us kind of mourn the departure of Danforth Chapel because of all the good memories, we're very, very pleased to have a number of artifacts from it, including this pew. In addition to the pew, we were able to save the ornament from the top of the Danforth Chapel steeple. We went through the buildings, the archives crew, and took everything we could find that we thought was historically interesting or important. And then we got a call from the demolition company asking if we wanted the spiky thing from the top of the steeple. We'd completely overlooked it. And they were nice enough to bring it down to us and add it to our collection. Another large artifact which we feel very fortunate to have is this demonstration slide rule. The Weremeyers, Fred and his son Bill, both used that in their math classes. And their students will probably remember that on the wall. We found it in the classroom in the lower school just a couple of days before the lower school was demolished. So we took it and brought it down to the archives, and we're very, very pleased to have it. Now, the Weremeyers taught for a total of 81 years at Country Day. They overlapped for a year, but their service began in 1930 and continued until 2011, which was really quite remarkable. They were both remarkable men. They were two of 260 faculty members and staff who served Country Day through the years. And if you're interested in a particular faculty member, we maintain files in just about all of them. So we have photos and sometimes biographical sketches. Sometimes we know where they went, what happened to them. So if you're curious, we'll be glad to try and help you find the information. If you attended Country Day at any time during its 75 years, you were one of 4,256 students to do so. Today, our ranks have thinned somewhat. We're down to 2,735. And we live in 47 of the 50 United States and 21 countries. So we're all over the place. Country Day itself was founded in 1917 when Smith Academy, a private school in the city of St. Louis, closed its doors. Smith, like Mary Institute, had been a feeder school for Washington University. By 1917, Smith was experiencing problems with discipline with the curriculum, and Washington University withdrew its support. So it closed its doors in 1917. Parents panicked, and that was one of the reasons why Country Day came to be. The closure of Smith Academy also led to the creation of a number of other schools. Rossman School, co-ed, was founded in 1917. Community School had been founded about 3 years earlier when the thoughts were in the wind that Smith Academy might not be continuing. John Burroughs School was founded in 1923, 6 years after St. Louis Country Day School. And one of the reasons it was founded was that St. Louis Country Day School's trustees declined to admit girls. And as a result, parents got together and formed co-ed John Burroughs. John Burroughs was also a country day school. The concept there was parents wanted their kids to have a top-flight education, but they really didn't want to send them 1,000 miles away to a distant prep school. They wanted the same level of education in a day school where the kids could come home at night. So the cities at that time, crowded, smoggy with coal smoke, and the thought was to get the kids out in the country, out in an environment which was cleaner, which had less crime, and that's the reason that the Country Day Schools came to be. Country Day School was located on an old estate in a very rural area just east of Lambert Airport, which at that time was a tiny operation. There are still nearly 1,000 former students who remember Country Day's first campus out on Brown Road in northwest St. Louis County. The architecture of the old school, as we called it, was very similar to that of the original John Burroughs buildings, stucco walls and red tile roofs. Students commuted to Country Day not by road, but by chartered electric trolley, which left the area around the Park Plaza in the Central West End, and 45 minutes later, the trolley arrived at the stop at St. Louis Country Day School. The trolley was considered one of the reasons why school spirit built so quickly, because all of the students and virtually all of the faculty traveled to and from school on the trolley. Some homework was done on the trolley. There were various discipline problems, but for the 15 years that the trolley operated, it was a major builder of school spirit. The Brown Road campus was fairly primitive. It was not on city water. It operated with water from a well, which periodically went dry. Electricity was provided by the same company that powered the electric trolleys that took the students to school, and it was said that when the trolley passed during the day, the lights would dim because it was the same power source. One of our most famous alums from Country Day was Vincent Price, a noted horror actor and also provided a voiceover for Thriller, Michael Jackson's album. And he came back to Country Day many times over the years. He was very, very kind to the school. We are fortunate to have a sketch of Vincent Price, which was executed by Mike Whitty, artist extraordinaire, class of 1962. The largest artifacts from Brown Road, which made the transfer to Warson Road, are located just inside the north entrance to the MICDS parking lot off of Warson Road. The Goldman Gates were donated in the early 1920s, Bedford limestone. The original light fixtures had rusted out long ago, but the school commissioned exact replicas. So what you see is what the Goldman Gates looked like way back in the 1920s at Brown Road. Campus was rural, it was rustic, but it was also located next to the airport. The airport grew, jets replaced propeller-driven aircraft, and it got to the point where teachers had to stop their teaching every time a jet took off. And McDonnell Aircraft had jet trainers that they were always testing. So it became apparent that a move was necessary, and amazingly, land was available directly adjacent to Mary Institute. 55 acres, the same size as the Brown Road campus. Originally, there were no plans for any collaborative activities between the two schools. In fact, a lot of the parents weren't real thrilled. They thought that their students on both sides of the fence would be distracted. So it wasn't universally popular. But over the winter break, 1957-58, the move was made. The move cost $135 because all of us as students were pressed into service, hauling stuff and packing things, and so that was cheap. The campus itself, the buildings cost $2 million. But the best bargain was the actual acquisition of the land through some very careful purchasing. They got 55.6 acres for $199,000. So buying Ladue acreage for $3,500 an acre, even back in the 1950s, that's a pretty good deal. The land where Country Day is located now was agricultural. Part of it was an asparagus farm. And one faculty member in the early years remembered going out and picking neglected asparagus for lunch. Country Day's Brown Road campus buildings survived for almost a decade after the school relocated to Ladue. The buildings had different uses. There was a trade school. The campus was used by the St. Louis football Cardinals as a training camp. But eventually the encroaching airport just made use of that land impossible. The airport bought the land, and by the mid-60s, all of the buildings had been razed. Today, there is not a shred of evidence that Country Day was ever out there, which is kind of sad, but we've got a lot of good memories and a lot of mementos to keep the memory of Brown Road alive. If you want to better visualize the Country Day campus, next time you're on Warson Road, go to the MAC, the big athletic complex. And in the lobby is a wonderful diorama of Brown Road. And it was contributed by the class of 1952. The buildings are all exact, the little buses and people and so forth. And there's one teeny tiny feature that you might look for. It is on the flagpole. Beneath the flag, there is a tiny pair of pants, about 1/4 of an inch long. And that memorializes a one-time tradition of pantsing, in the all-boys school, removing a student's pants and running them up the flagpole. Perhaps a young student, perhaps someone who'd misbehaved. It was a form of hazing, and eventually the school outlawed it, but the pants are still there on the diorama. When you're in the MAC lobby, also be sure to check out the 12-foot wide mural of the Brown Road campus. It was painted by Phil Aldrich, who was the art teacher and for 4 years was head of Country Day. It's the only known color representation of Brown Road. Of course, most alums remember the Warson Road campus of Country Day, to which we moved in early 1958. The campus stayed pretty much the same over the years of Country Day. They did add a swimming pool, a new library, and an arts center. By the early 2000s, new needs became apparent because of the fact that the school was now co-ed and was twice as large as it had been on its own. So the lower school was demolished, Danforth Chapel was demolished, the classrooms, which were generally the shop, art, and music, were demolished, and Brower Hall and McDonald Hall now stand in their place. The archive room, the Country Day archive room, is approximately where the lower school used to stand. We have a lot of smaller items in the archives. They're not all pews and slide rules. In these cases, you can see playing cards and ashtrays and matches and belt buckles, all kinds of things. They seem to be encouraging smoking. We, as students, used to sell them to our parents. We had to sell them to raise money for the junior prom or other student activities. And so a lot of them still exist in Country Day homes today. There are a couple of interesting little items in there that we're pleased to have. Beanies. For a couple of years, Country Day students had beanies. And these were for younger students. They were required to wear these little cloth beanies and tip their hats every time they came to an upperclassman. Crazy stuff as a form of hazing. And interestingly, the school condoned it. But after a couple of years, the silliness ran its course and no more beanies. So they are very rare. And one alum gave us his beanie, which he said they were supposed to have thrown in the bonfire at the end of the school year. He said he couldn't do that. He couldn't throw away a perfectly good hat. So he kept it, and now we have it. A larger item that we keep in the case is the Country Day cannon. Now, if you went to school at Country Day in the 50s, you were familiar with the cannon. After that, probably not. But it has a very, very interesting history. It is what's called a signal cannon, and it was crafted in the early 1900s, 1910, we believe. It was owned by the Kretschmar family, whose son Ted was a student at Country Day. And in the early 1950s, they began taking it to football games and firing the cannon every time Country Day scored a touchdown. They'd take it to B and C games as well as varsity games. And it really became kind of a mascot, noisy one, but a mascot. In October of 1953, when Ted Kretschmar was on the varsity team, the team was 8-0. Coach Hughes once said it was one of the best teams he had ever coached. So everybody headed over to Burroughs for the Burroughs game, and the Country Day touchdowns began to flow, and the cannon was fired. That, despite the fact that the Burroughs headmaster had forbidden it to be fired on the campus. There had been some problems with the B and C games, and they didn't want the same thing to happen with the varsity. Well, the Kretschmars and, or Mr. Kretschmar, and some of the other parents at lunchtime went over to Schneidhorst's. They had a nice lunch and a libation or two. They talked it over and they decided that Burroughs had given them insufficient notice to not bring and fire the cannon. So they brought it back, touched off the cannon. First time they did, there are rumors that they actually broke a couple of windows at Burroughs with the concussion from the little noisy cannon. The Ladue police were called. They came over, nabbed the parents, nabbed the cannon, hauled them all off to the police department, where they apparently had a spirited conversation. Finally, they agreed to let the parents and the cannon go with the understanding that its days of being fired were over. It came back to the game with a little funeral bow tied to it. And then the next issue of the news had a very doleful obituary for the cannon talked about how important it was and how sad it was that it was not going to be heard anymore. And it was a very eloquent obituary. It happened to be written by a gentleman by the name of Jack Danforth. 30 years later, John Danforth, became one of 3 graduates serving in the U.S. Senate at the same time. Now, sports, not just football, always played an important part of country day life for players and for enthusiastic spectators. We have a very, very large collection of sports memorabilia, as you can see. We have original game balls dating back a century. Remarkably, they're still in pretty good shape. The helmets, football helmets, you can see the progression of the headgear from no face protection to a lot safer designs today. We have a lot of trophies from various sports, including track and basketball and tennis. And they're here for folks who visit the archives. They enjoy seeing these mementos from their years. We have various RAM representations that have been given us over the years. We had live RAMs from time to time, and we have the covers for those RAMs here in the archives. Today's students don't realize that our school didn't always call its sports teams the Rams. For about the first 35 years of Country Day's existence, its teams went by a variety of names, sort of made up. They were called the Cadascos or the Cadascos, which was the original pronunciation of that word back in the teens and 20s, Country Day School, Cadasco. They were called the Brown Roaders sometimes. That harkens back to the location of the school, Brown Road, the original campus. And briefly they were called the Redcoats, and that one didn't stick. In the early 1950s, they had a competition in the Country Day News to choose a new mascot. Rams was chosen. Unbeknownst to our students, Ladue High had chosen the exact same mascot about 2 weeks earlier. So then there was a lot of consternation about, we don't want to have the same mascot. But people liked it, it stuck, and it stays that way today. Country Day athletes won letters, cloth letters, various shapes and sizes through the years. They changed. Stripes and various other additions were made to the letters. And many of these were applied to letter jackets. This particular one belonged to John Kittner. And speaking of letters, you may remember the wooden letter boards which hung in Alumni Dining Hall, and for older alumni also were in the dining hall on Brown Road. These were all hand lettered in gold, and they were produced at the request of alumni. We have a complete set of them. The archives relocated them to the MAC, where they are now located on the wall on the balcony. They were relocated in 2011. And after you've viewed the diorama of Brown Road and the mural, take a walk into the main hall and you'll find the Letterman boards. There's 74 of them, and that's where they will remain. Sticking with the sports theme, we have a lot of mementos from the years of our 2 legendary football coaches, Robert "Pop" Hughes and Ron Holtman. For Pop Hughes, we have an unusual thing, a little poem, the Wiley Mentor poem or song, which was dedicated to him for his creative football plays. Pop Hughes was notorious for coming up with trick plays for which, in earlier years of football, there were no rules. And so he would manage to get this play into the lineup and score a touchdown or an extra point, and the next week the officials would change the rules to take care of the loophole that he had found. We've also been given many wonderful items by the family of Ron Holtman, who was so successful in producing state championship football teams. We have many plaques and other items from his years of championship football. If you're interested in Country Day football, there are two books that Peter Griffin, my co-archivist, has authored. One is on the ABC League, which is no longer in existence, replaced by the Metro League. And the other is strictly on Country Day football. It is a massively researched book that has information on every team that Country Day fielded, including B and C. These books are available, and we'll be giving you our email address in just a couple of minutes. One tradition that the archive supports, and of which we and I think the school are especially proud to support, is the annual Memorial Day Observance. It's held in the upper school, and it honors the 33 Country Day alumni who've made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation. A brochure recalling their service with biographical sketches is available to students at the assembly, and if you're interested in a copy, we'll be glad to send you one. So, the Country Day Archives remains alive and well. Our collections keep growing. We have contributions all the time from alums and family members. For example, we recently received from the family of Jim Singer, class of 23, a wonderful photo album that Jim had put together in those years of photos of what was going on campus at that time. That included the construction of the new buildings, the auditorium, the lunchroom, and the gym. And these are photos that we did not have. So here, almost 100 years later, we have a wonderful photo collection that really adds to our inventory in the archives. We're also moving forward in preservation. We have digitized all 1,750 issues of the Country Day News going back to 1917. Those are available online. They're searchable. They're a lot of fun to use. You put in a name, you never know what you're going to find. There are instructions on how to use the news website on micds.org in the alumni section, or we have a cheat sheet which we're happy to send you if you request it. We are also digitizing the first 50 years of the Cadasco yearbooks. That's been requested, and so we're moving forward with that. We also add to our collection sometimes by eBay. We keep standing searches on eBay, and it's amazing the things that will pop up on there that we're very, very pleased to have. So we hope you've enjoyed this tour of the archives, and we hope that maybe someday you come to see us. Summer is really the best time when the students are not here, and if you contact the Alumni and Development Office, they will get in touch with us and we'll set up a time that is mutually agreeable. We've mentioned a few things that the archives has to offer in terms of brochures, things like that. And once again, if there's anything we've talked about that's of interest, you'd like to learn more about it, just let us know and we will be glad to provide the information. For any of these items or anything else, here is our email address. So jot it down, and we hope you use it. So thanks for visiting. Remember, hear the crash, see the flash, go Rams.